10 years. 10 years of waking before sunrise. Hands raw from ice and salt. Just to sell fish in a market that never once said thank you. I did it for him. For the man who couldn't afford his own law school registration. For the boy who once stood in that same market, begging me not to give up on him. I sold everything I had. My jewelry, my peace of mind, even my own name. Signed onto a loan he never knew about. Just to keep his dream alive. And when he finally became a lawyer, I thought that was our victory. I was wrong, because 3 years later, a stranger walked into that same fish market, called my name, and placed a folded document into my hands. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a thank you. It was a divorce petition, filed by my own husband, using the very law degree I paid for, to try to take away the one thing I had left, our home. This is the story of a woman who built a lawyer with her bare hands, and the lawsuit he used to try to erase her. The market smelled like salt and struggle before the sun even came up. Jasmine was already there, sleeves rolled to her elbows, arranging fish on melting ice like she was setting a table for guests who never showed up on time. Her hands were cracked. Her back ached in a way that 26 years old shouldn't feel, but she smiled anyway. Because in this market, a smile was the only thing that didn't cost extra. "You're behind on your bill again," said the ice supplier, not even looking up from his clipboard. "I know," Jasmine said. "Give me until Friday." "That's what you said last Friday, and I'll say it again next Friday if I have to." She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just the exhausted rhythm of a woman who had learned to turn desperation into something that sounded like confidence. Her friend Renee leaned against the next stall, arms crossed, watching. "You're drowning. Jasmine, you know that." "Right, I'm swimming. You're drowning real slow." With a smile on your face. Jasmine didn't answer. She didn't need to. Every woman in that market carried the same debt, the same tired feet, the same quiet math running in the back of her mind. How much for ice? How much for the stall? How much left over to actually eat? That's when she noticed him. He was standing near the edge of the lot, hands shoved into the pockets of a jacket too thin for the morning cold, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Young, maybe 22. Sharp eyes, tired face, the kind of tired that came from thinking too hard. Not working too hard. "You look lost," Jasmine said, walking over before she even decided to. He looked up, startled. "I'm not lost. I'm Bert." Stuck. Same thing, depending on the day. He almost smiled. "I was supposed to meet someone. He was going to help me with tuition. He didn't show. Tuition for what law school?" He said it quietly, like it embarrassed him to want something that big out loud. "Registration closes today. If I don't pay, I lose the semester." Jasmine studied him for a moment. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know he'd one day stand in a courtroom in a suit that cost more than her entire stall. All she knew was the way he said law school like it was the only door he had left. And it was closing. "How much do you need?" "You don't have to," I asked. "How much?" He told her. It wasn't a small number. It was the kind of number that made grown men in that market go quiet. Renee, still watching from a few feet away, called out, "Jasmine, don't you dare." Jasmine ignored her. "My name is Jasmine." "Marcus," he said. "Marcus, go pay your fees before the office closes. I'll figure out the rest." "I can't ask you to. You didn't ask." I offered. There's a difference. That night, after the market closed and the last of the ice had melted into puddles on the concrete, Jasmine sat alone in her small room, holding the one thing of real value. She owned her mother's gold earrings, wrapped in a faded cloth she'd kept since she was a little girl. She stared at them for a long time. Then she wrapped them back up, tucked them into her bag, and told herself it was just for now, just this once, just enough to help a stranger who looked at his own future like it was already slipping through his fingers. Renee found her the next morning before she'd even reached the pawn shop. "Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing." "I'm doing exactly what you think I'm doing." "Jasmine, you don't even know this man. I know what it looks like to almost lose everything you're fighting for." "I felt that." Renee shook her head slowly. "One day, this heart of yours is going to get you in trouble." Jasmine just smiled and walked toward the pawn shop door. She had no idea how right Renee would turn out to be. The wedding was small. No white dress from a fancy boutique. No string quartered. No ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Just a borrowed dress. A plate of jollof rice for every guest. And Jasmine standing under a tent held up by rented poles, promising to love a man who owned nothing but ambition. She didn't mind. She wasn't marrying his bank account. She was marrying his future. Diana, Marcus's mother, arrived like weather, the kind you could feel coming before you saw it. She swept through the small gathering in a dress that cost more than the entire wedding, kissed her son on both cheeks, and turned to Jasmine with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So," Diane said, looking her up and down, "you're the one. I'm Jasmine. I know who you are." A pause, long enough to feel deliberate. "You have entered a family of greatness. My dear, my son is going far. Very far. You should be grateful." "I am grateful," Jasmine said. "For him, not for where he's going." Diane's smile flickered, just slightly, like she wasn't used to being corrected. "We'll see." Marcus squeezed Jasmine's hand under the table later that night. "Ignore her. She means well." "Does she? She just wants the best for me." Jasmine wanted to ask what happened when the best for him stopped, including her. But she didn't. Not yet. That question was still years away from finding its voice. The months that followed blurred into a single, exhausting rhythm. Wake before sunrise. Sell fish until her hands went numb. Come home. Cook. Help Marcus study by candlelight when the power went out, which was often. Every naira she made went into 2 piles, one for food, and one, always larger, for him. But even that wasn't enough. The bar exam registration came with a number that made Jasmine's stomach drop the first time she saw it written down. It wasn't tuition anymore. It was the final stretch accommodation. Transport. Materials. The exam fee itself. All due within 1 week. "I'll defer," Marcus said, staring at the paper like it was a verdict. "I'll take it next year." "No. Jasmine. Look at the amount." "I've seen it." She took the paper from his hands, folded it, and set it on the table like the conversation was already over. "You are not deferring anything." "With what money?" That night, after Marcus fell asleep with a law textbook still open on his chest, Jasmine sat at the small kitchen table with a calculator, a stack of bills, and a decision she'd already made in her heart hours ago. She didn't have enough, not even close. So she did something she never told him about, until much later she walked into a small lending office 3 streets from the market, and applied for a loan, not in her name, in his. She knew what she was doing. She knew it wasn't right. Not fully. But she also knew that if the loan showed her name, a fish seller with no steady income, no collateral, no credit history, it would be denied in 5 minutes. Marcus's name, even without his signature on the application, carried just enough weight from his university records to get approved. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she'd pay it off quietly before he ever noticed. She told herself a lot of things that night. sitting alone under a flickering bulb, signing papers with a hand that didn't shake, even though her heart was pounding. The money came through 2 days later. She placed it in an envelope and handed it to Marcus without explanation. "Where did this come from?" he asked, staring at the amount. "Does it matter?" "Jasmine, this is too much for you to just Marcus." Her voice was steady. "Final, go and become what you said you would become. That's all that matters right now." He looked at her for a long moment, like he wanted to ask again, wanted to dig deeper, but exhaustion, his and hers, won out over curiosity. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Then become a man who does." He left for his exam preparations 3 days later. Suitcase in one hand, a folder of documents in the other. Jasmine stood in the doorway and watched him go, one hand resting against the frame, the other pressed flat against her chest, like she could physically hold her own heart together. She had no idea that folded loan document, tucked away and forgotten in a drawer, would resurface years later in a courtroom, in front of a judge, used as a weapon against her by the very man she'd broken herself in half to protect. For now, she just whispered the same thing she always whispered when she was afraid. "Come back and prove it was worth it." The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of the lunch rush. Jasmine almost didn't answer it. Her hands were covered in ice water, and a customer was waiting for change. But something made her wipe her palms on her apron and pick up anyway. "Jasmine." Marcus's voice was strange, tight, like he was holding something too big for his own chest. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I passed. The words didn't register at first. "You passed what, the bar exam?" "Jasmine, I passed. I'm going to be called to the bar." For a moment, the entire market disappeared. The noise, the smell of fish and diesel, the shouting of vendors, all of it faded into a kind of ringing silence. Jasmine pressed a hand to her mouth, and before she even realized it, tears were sliding down her face. "Say it again," she whispered. "I passed." She screamed, not a small sound, a full, unfiltered scream of joy that turned every head in the market. Renee came running, thinking something was wrong, and found Jasmine laughing and crying at the same time. Phone pressed to her ear like she was afraid the words would disappear if she let go. "He passed, Renee. He passed." Word spread through the market like fire through dry grass. Vendors who had watched Jasmine struggle for years, who had extended her credit and shaken their heads at her stubborn faith in a man with nothing, now gathered around her stall, clapping, cheering, calling out blessings. "The fish money made a lawyer," one woman shouted, and the whole market erupted into laughter and applause. Jasmine stood in the middle of it, overwhelmed, thinking foolishly, beautifully, that this was the moment everything finally paid off, that the debt, the exhaustion, the years of counting coins under candlelight had all led here. To this, she was right about one thing. It was the beginning of something, just not the something she imagined. The celebration dinner that weekend was the first time Jasmine truly saw Marcus in a suit, a new one, tailored, nothing like the thin jacket he used to wear in the market all those years ago. He looked different, taller, somehow sharper. Diane arrived glowing with pride, introducing her son to every guest as the barrister, never once as my son who almost gave up, never mentioning the woman standing quietly beside him in a simple green dress. The same woman who had paid for nearly every page of every law book he'd ever opened. "Doesn't he look wonderful?" Diane said to a cluster of admiring guests, gesturing toward Marcus like he was a piece of art she'd personally sculpted. "I always knew he'd become someone." Jasmine smiled and said nothing. She was used to being invisible in rooms like this. She told herself it didn't matter, as long as Marcus saw her. But 2 weeks later, when she showed up at his new office with lunch in hand, something she'd cooked that morning before opening her stall, She got her first real glimpse of what was coming. "Barrister Regis," a colleague said, sticking his head into the small waiting area. "Who is this?" Marcus hesitated, just for a second, but Jasmine felt that hesitation land in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. "She's someone from home," he said. Someone from home. Not his wife. Not the woman who sold jewelry and signed loans in his name and gave up sleep for years so he could sit behind that very desk. Someone from home. Like she was a distant relative. A family friend. A stranger passing through. Jasmine set the food down without a word and left. That night, when Marcus came home and tried to explain colleagues, pressure, unnecessary explanations, Jasmine sat across from him, arms crossed, voice steady but cold. "When you had no shoes, was I someone from home? Jasmine, when you needed your registration money, was I someone from home? You're making a small thing big. A small thing." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Marcus, when you ate food from my hands and studied law under my roof, was I someone from home?" He didn't answer, and in the silence that followed, Jasmine understood something she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. The market had made him a lawyer, but somewhere between the courtroom and the corner office, he had started to become ashamed of the market that made him. Alexis Cole walked into Marcus's life, the way lightning walks into a summer sky, sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. She was a senior associate at the firm, sharp-suited and sharper-tongued. The kind of woman who could dismantle an argument in a courtroom and rebuild it into something better before opposing counsel even realized what happened. Marcus came home that first week, talking about her constantly, not with suspicion in his voice. Not yet, but with something Jasmine recognized instantly and hated herself for recognizing. Admiration. "She's brilliant," he said one night, barely looking up from his files. The way she structured her argument today, even the senior partner listened. "That's good," Jasmine said, setting a plate of food in front of him that he barely touched. "She knows judges, senior advocates, people I've only ever read about." He shook his head, almost in disbelief. "She's moved in circles I'm just now stepping into." "Then learn from her," Jasmine said quietly, and meant it, even as something small and cold settled in her chest. She didn't know yet how much space that admiration would eventually take up. She only knew that Marcus stayed later at the office each week, that his phone buzzed more often at dinner, that Alexis's name started appearing in conversations the way weather appears in small talk constant. Unremarkable. Always there. Meanwhile, the market kept spinning the way it always had. Indifferent to the quiet unraveling happening in Jasmine's home. The freezer broke on a Thursday. 6 crates of fish. Already paid for. Already promised to customers. Sitting inside a unit that had stopped cooling sometime overnight. Jasmine stood in front of it, hands trembling, doing the math she always did in moments of crisis. How much lost? How much owed? How much further behind this would put her? "Call Derek," Renee said, already dialing before Jasmine could argue. Derek was the fish supplier, steady, dépendable, the kind of man who showed up when he said he would and asked for nothing in return but respect. He arrived within 20 minutes. Sleeves rolled up, already assessing the damage before he'd even said hello. "How many crates?" 6. "I'm coming." And he was already moving. He worked fast, calm, methodical, running the generator, repacking the ice, giving quiet instructions to the market boys while Jasmine stood frozen, watching years of careful saving threaten to melt away in front of her. "Breathe," Derek said, not unkindly. "The fish hasn't spoiled. We still have time." "You don't know that." "I know enough." He glanced at her, really looked at her. in a way that made her realize how long it had been since anyone had looked at her, like she mattered beyond what she could give them. Go outside. The air in here isn't helping you. Later, once the crisis had passed, Derek refused to let her pay for the fuel or the labor. You always know how to make kindness sound like business, she said. Exhausted. Grateful. Unsteady. It's easier that way. There was nothing improper in it. Nothing spoken that shouldn't have been spoken. Nothing touched that shouldn't have been touched. But there was ease. There was safety. There was a version of being seen that Jasmine hadn't felt inside her own marriage in longer than she wanted to admit. Marcus found them like that one evening. Jasmine mid-laugh, wiping tears from an earlier moment of stress. Derek standing close enough to have just finished offering comfort. Nothing more. Nothing less. But Marcus's face changed the second he saw them. Am I interrupting something, Marcus? No. Please. Continue. His voice was flat, controlled in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting. I wouldn't want to get in the way of whatever this is. He was helping me. The freezer broke. 6 crates. I don't need the details. He turned and walked away before she could finish. And Jasmine stood there, humiliated in front of the one person who had never once made her feel small. That night, the conversation at home was short and cutting. You couldn't even show me respect in the open market. Marcus said, nothing improper happened. I saw enough. No. Marcus, you saw what you wanted to see. Jasmine's voice cracked. Not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Every time I try to breathe, you find a way to make it look like betrayal. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask questions. He simply looked at her the way a man looks at evidence he's already decided is guilty, and walked into the bedroom, leaving her standing alone in a silence that felt heavier than any argument. Jasmine didn't know it yet, but that silence was the last quiet moment before everything broke. The house had been quiet for 3 weeks before Jasmine understood why. Marcus started coming home later, then not at all. Some nights, with vague explanations about case deadlines and client meetings that never quite added up. Jasmine told herself it was pressure, ambition, the weight of a new career. She told herself a lot of things during those 3 weeks. The way people do when the truth is standing right in front of them, and they simply aren't ready to let it in yet. She found out about the house by accident. A colleague of Marcus's mentioned it in passing at a market stall, assuming Jasmine already knew a beautiful new property across town. Fully furnished. Closed just the week before. Congratulations, the woman said, smiling. Marcus mentioned you'd both be moving soon. Jasmine smiled back, said thank you, and walked home with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. That night, she asked him directly, "You bought a house?" Marcus didn't even flinch. "I signed the papers last week, while I was still cooking dinner for you here every night. Jasmine, you worked too hard to remain trapped in this life. I wanted to give us something better. Us." She repeated the word like it tasted wrong in her mouth. "Did we walk through that house together? Did we choose it together? Or did you simply decide again without me?" He didn't answer, and in his silence, Jasmine felt something inside her. Something that had bent for years without breaking finally begin to crack. "This marriage has been dead for a long time," Marcus finally said, quiet and cold. "Stop pretending otherwise." He left that night. No shouting. No dramatic exit, just a bag, packed with quiet. Practiced efficiency. Like he'd been preparing for this moment far longer than Jasmine had realized. She stood in the doorway long after his car had disappeared down the road, waiting for something, an apology, a change of heart. Anything that never came. The papers arrived 4 days later. A young man approached her stall in the middle of a normal Tuesday morning, asking for her by her full married name. Jasmine's hands went still over the fish she'd been arranging. "I have a document for you." "What is it?" You'll need to see it yourself. She opened it right there in the market. Ice melting at her feet. Customers pausing to watch a private catastrophe unfold in public. The words on the page didn't feel real at first. Legal language. Cold and clinical. Describing her marriage like a case file instead of a life she had bled for. Petitioner seeks dissolution of marriage. Respondent has failed to adapt to petitioner's current professional standing. Respondent's continued association with one Derek Owens has caused irreparable emotional harm to the marriage. Jasmine read it twice before the full weight of it landed. He wasn't just leaving. He was rewriting her, turning 10 years of sacrifice into a footnote. Turning a freezer repair into an affair. Turning a woman who had sold her own mother's earrings to keep him in school into someone unfit. Uneducated. Morally careless. And underneath all of it, buried in the final pages, was the real target. He wanted the house. Their house. The one she had kept standing through every unpaid bill and every missed meal. While he built a new life somewhere shinier without her. "Give me that paper," Renee said, snatching it before Jasmine's shaking hands could drop it. She read through it fast, her expression darkening with every line. "This man called you troublesome. He said you're unable to fit into his professional life that fish money paid for," Jasmine said, her voice hollow. "He's asking the court to give him the house." "Jasmine, the house you kept alive while he chased his degree." "A man has already left the home," Jasmine whispered, staring at the paper like it might change if she looked at it long enough. "But his greed is still living inside it." Renee wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Steady and fierce. Some men aren't men at all. Their hunger wearing a nice suit. Jasmine didn't cry. Not yet. She was too stunned. Too far past the reach of tears in that first hour. She simply stood there, holding the paper that accused her of destroying the very thing she had built with her own two hands, and felt something shift inside her quiet. Deliberate. Unshakable. He wanted a clean story. A villain to walk away from. He was about to learn that some women don't disappear quietly. They gather evidence. The lawyer who agreed to represent her didn't ask for a single dollar up front. "Years ago, you sold me fish on credit and never once made me feel small for owing you," Attorney James Okoro said, setting a fresh legal pad on the table between them. "Let me repay dignity with dignity." Jasmine hadn't expected to cry in that first meeting, but she did quiet. Exhausted tears. The kind that come when someone finally treats you like you're worth defending. Okoro didn't rush her. He simply waited, then got to work. "He's not just leaving you," Okoro said, once she'd steadied herself. "He's trying to make you look dirty so he can walk away clean. We're not going to let that story stand. What do you need from me?" "Everything. Receipts, bank transfers, old messages, anything that shows what you actually did for this man's education, and anything that shows Derek's involvement was business. Nothing more." That evening, Jasmine sat on her kitchen floor surrounded by every scrap of paper she'd kept over the years, sorting them into piles with Renee's help. Tuition payments, household expenses, cold storage debts taken on his behalf. A message Marcus had sent years earlier, one she'd forgotten she'd saved. "If I miss this payment, everything will scatter. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Screenshot that," Renee said. "Print it tomorrow. Let the court read his own words back to him." The courtroom, when the day finally came, felt colder than Jasmine expected. Marcus sat across the room in a sharp gray suit, avoiding her eyes, flanked by his own attorney, who opened with practiced confidence. "This petition concerns a marriage that has broken down beyond repair," the opposing counsel said smoothly. "The respondent's alleged sacrifices during the petitioner's education, even if accepted, fall within the bounds of ordinary marital support. A wife supporting her husband does not become the owner of his future." Jasmine felt her jaw tighten. Beside her, Okoro placed a steady hand on the table, a silent reminder. Let the evidence speak first. More troubling. The opposing counsel continued. Is the respondent's improper closeness with a Mr. Redder, Derek Owens, a fish supplier, which created emotional strain and ultimately destroyed the trust in this marriage. My lord, Okoro said, rising calmly, if the petitioner alleges misconduct, let him prove misconduct. Sacrifice is not shame, and support is not scandal. The evidence came slowly, methodically. Bank transfers, tuition receipts, the cold storage ledger, which Renee herself testified to under oath, describing exactly why the market women had extended Jasmine credit year after year. We stood for her because we knew she wasn't wasting money, Renee said, her voice steady, despite the opposing counsel's attempts to rattle her. She was building her husband's future. Every naira, every dollar she ever asked us for went toward that man's education. If helping a crying woman means cheating, then every decent person on this earth is guilty of something. The courtroom went quiet. Then Okoro read Marcus's own message aloud, the one Jasmine had saved without ever imagining she'd need it. If I miss this payment, everything will scatter. I don't know what I'd do without you. My lord, Okoro said, letting the silence stretch just long enough to matter. A man who wrote these words cannot now stand before this court and call the same woman's sacrifice ordinary, simply because he is wearing a better suit today. Marcus didn't look up, but the case wasn't without its complications. When the opposing counsel produced the old loan document, the one Jasmine had taken out in Marcus's name without his knowledge, all those years ago, her stomach dropped. Did you authorize this loan? The attorney asked Marcus directly. No, I did not. So while the respondent stands before this court, presenting herself as an honest, sacrificial wife, the attorney pressed, turning back to Jasmine. She also allowed a financial obligation to be created in your name without your consent. Jasmine's hands trembled, but she didn't look away. It's true, she said, her voice cracking but clear. I was desperate. His fees were due, and I didn't know where else to turn. I was wrong to do it without telling him, but I never once did it to hurt him. Okoro didn't flinch. My lord, there is a difference between a desperate wrong committed to keep a family from collapsing and a calculated petition built on lies. Mrs. Reyes admitted her mistake the moment she was asked. The petitioner, by contrast, has spent this entire hearing trying to bury the truth beneath accusations he cannot prove. The judge said little through most of the proceedings, letting the evidence accumulate on its own weight. But as the hearing drew to a close, one thing had become unmistakably clear to everyone in that room. This was never a story about a woman who couldn't let go. It was a story about a man who never learned how to hold on. Alexis found out the truth, the way most people eventually do, sideways, through a conversation she wasn't supposed to overhear. Two paralegals were discussing the case in the break room, not realizing she was standing just around the corner. Did you hear what came out in court today? One of them said. Turns out the wife never actually cheated. The supplier was just helping her. There's no proof of anything improper at all. Alexis set down her coffee cup very slowly. That evening, she called Marcus and asked him to come to her apartment. He arrived expecting comfort. He found something else entirely. You told me your wife betrayed you, Alexis said, arms crossed, voice steady in the way that only comes from someone who has already made up her mind. You told me Derek was the reason your marriage fell apart. Now I'm hearing a very different story in that courtroom. Court isn't always the truth. Alexis, lawyers know how to arrange sympathy. I am a lawyer. Marcus, don't insult me with that answer. She stepped closer, searching his face for the man she thought she knew. Did you ever actually catch her cheating? Not suspect. Not assume. Catch. Silence. Answer me. I saw enough, he said finally. That's not an answer. That's a excuse you've been telling yourself so you could feel justified. Alexis shook her head slowly, something breaking behind her eyes. You bought that house because you wanted a future that didn't smell like everything you suffered through. Do you hear yourself? That woman was inside that suffering with you. Every single day. She didn't create your struggle, Marcus. She carried you through it. You don't understand. No, I don't. Because I only ever knew the version of her you gave me. Bitter, difficult, unfaithful. And I believed you. Because why wouldn't I? Her voice cracked. Just slightly. I watched my own mother shrink beside a man who outgrew her. I promised myself I'd never help a man do that to another woman again. I'm not marrying that kind of man. Marcus, I won't. She was gone within the week. And with her went the last illusion Marcus had been standing on. He drove to his mother's house that night, unannounced, still wearing yesterday's shirt. Alexis left, he said. Before Diane had even closed the door behind him, she found out the truth. What truth? That Jasmine never betrayed me. That I made it look that way so I could feel justified walking away. His voice shook with something that hadn't surfaced in years, not anger, but grief. You helped me become ashamed of the woman who built my entire life. Mom. Why? Diane's composure finally cracked. And for the first time, Marcus watched his mother's carefully maintained armor fall away entirely. I once had a stall of my own, she said quietly. Not big, but it was mine. I had customers who waited for me. I had pride. She sat down heavily, as though the memory itself carried weight. Your father came with big dreams and a sweeter mouth than I'd ever heard. He told me to give it up, that his success would lift us both. I believed him. I sold everything I had, and then his dream failed. And he left me with nothing but a child and other people's whispers. I didn't know that. When I saw Jasmine selling fish for you, carrying you the way I once carried your father, I saw myself again. And instead of warning her with love, I punished her with my own pain. So you turned me against her because of what happened to you. Diane's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I was wrong. Marcus, I poured the poison, but you drank it. And you called it wisdom. Don't come here now and try to make me the only villain in a story your own hands helped write. Marcus sat in silence for a long time, the weight of 2 generations of fear and shame settling onto his shoulders at once. 3 days later, the verdict came down. The court finds no sufficient evidence of improper conduct between the respondent and Mr. Owens. The court further recognizes substantial evidence that the respondent contributed materially to the petitioner's education and the maintenance of the marital home. This court is not persuaded that equity favors a man who abandoned that home while seeking to dispossess the woman who sustained it. The respondent shall retain full possession of the house. The petition for dissolution is granted. The allegations of moral misconduct are not established. Jasmine didn't smile when the words were read. She didn't cry either. She simply closed her eyes, breathed for what felt like the first time in months, and let 10 years of carried weight finally, quietly, begin to lift. The house felt different in the weeks after the verdict, not because anything had physically changed, but because for the first time in years, every room in it belonged to her without question. Jasmine went back to the market the following Monday, apron tied, hands steady, as though nothing had happened at all. But something had shifted underneath the surface. She noticed it in small ways, the way she stood a little taller when Diane's name came up in conversation. The way she no longer flinched when customers asked about the lawyer's wife. She wasn't anyone's wife anymore. She was simply Jasmine, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Marcus showed up at the market 3 weeks later, standing awkwardly near her stall the way he had all those years ago. Back when he was nothing but a nervous law student with an empty wallet and a borrowed future. Jasmine. She looked up, unsurprised. Marcus. Alexis is gone. The new house is empty. My mother and I barely speak. He rubbed the back of his neck. The confident courtroom posture, nowhere in sight. Everything I thought I was building fell apart the moment I stopped standing next to the person who actually built it. Why are you telling me this? Because I know now. You were my real home. Not the house. Not the title. You. Jasmine set down the fish she'd been arranging and looked at him fully. The way she hadn't allowed herself to in months. There was no anger left in her that had burned off somewhere between the courtroom and the quiet nights that followed. What remained was something steadier and far more permanent. No. Marcus. Jasmine. Please. Can we start again? I forgive you, she said, and she meant it. But I will not go back to a man who had to lose everything else first. Before he remembered what I was worth, she shook her head slowly. I loved you. I carried you. I covered your shame when you had nothing to offer the world but a dream. I will not walk back into that shame now. Just because you're lonely. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to argue with. The truth, once spoken plainly, didn't leave much room for negotiation. He nodded once, turned, and walked away, not chased, not begged after, simply allowed to leave the way he'd once left her, quietly, without ceremony. Derek was waiting near the edge of the market, the way he always seemed to be lately, close enough to matter, far enough to never overstep. You okay? He asked. As she walked over, I will be. Walk with me, she hesitated. Not out of doubt, but out of respect for herself, for the version of her that had spent 10 years pouring everything she had into someone who never once asked what she needed in return. Only if there's no rush, she said. There's no rush. Derek said simply, I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer. If that's what you need, and if it takes a long time, then I'll walk slowly. They didn't fall into each other's arms that day. There was no dramatic embrace, no swelling music, no promise of forever whispered under the market lights. Just two people, walking side by side, unhurried, honest about exactly where they stood. For once, Jasmine wasn't building someone else's future at the expense of her own. She was simply present, whole, standing in her own name, on her own 2 feet, in a life that finally, entirely, belonged to her. That evening, as the market emptied and the last of the ice began to melt into the concrete, Renee found her sitting quietly by her stall, watching the sky change color. You look different, Renee said, settling beside her. I feel different. Jasmine exhaled slowly, like she was releasing something she'd been holding for a decade. Lighter. Good, Renee said, bumping her shoulder gently. You spent 10 years building someone else's name. It's about time you got to keep your own. Jasmine smiled, a real one. Unguarded. The first in longer than she could remember. Yeah, she said softly, looking out over the market that had once held every ounce of her sacrifice, and now simply held her peace. It is. She sold fish to make him a lawyer. He used that law degree to try and take away the only thing she had left. But here's what he never understood. You cannot build a man's entire future out of a woman's sacrifice, and then act surprised when that same woman refuses to disappear quietly. Jasmine didn't win because a judge felt sorry for her. She won because she kept the receipts. She kept the messages. She kept the truth, folded away and waiting, for the exact moment she'd need it most. And when that moment came, she didn't beg. She didn't shrink. She simply told the truth and let it stand. That's the part I want you to sit with tonight. Somewhere out there, someone is doing exactly what Jasmine did, waking up early, giving until it hurts, believing in someone so completely, they forget to ask what happens if that person stops believing back. If that's you, hear this clearly. Your sacrifice was never ordinary. Your worth was never up for someone else's negotiation. And you are allowed to walk away from anyone who only remembers your value after they've already lost you. So tell me if you were in Jasmine's shoes, standing in that courtroom, staring at a man who tried to erase everything you built. Would you have forgiven him, or would you have walked away? Exactly like she did. Type it below. I want to hear it. And if this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Give this video a like if you believe women like Jasmine deserve to be seen. And share it with someone who needs to hear tonight that walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the strongest thing you'll ever do. I'll see you in the next story.